Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction, and thank you for having me. Is my presentation? Oh, here we go. Right. So, as Andrea mentioned, I have studied both art theory and gender studies, and the presentation that you will see is the result of my research, my master's research. I have dealt with queer issues connected to art in both of my theses. And in my gender studies thesis, I have focused on the contemporary queer art in Czechia and Slovakia. And even though the title seems rather understandable and simple, we have to unpack some of the terms right away. Because at first I thought I would call it Czech and Slovakian contemporary queer art, but there's a reason why I ended up with this title, and there's a big difference because I mean can be a bit tricky with calling something Czech or Slovak. I mean, what are the borders? What are the connotation that it bears? Is it tied to the nationality? Is it tied to the geopolitics? It can be a bit difficult to determine that. And some of the art that I'm going to show is not even made by Czech or Slovak artists, or maybe not even made in the Czech Republic or Slovakia. Because the subject of my research, I focused on a couple of exhibitions. It was 6 exhibitions that were group exhibitions that could be called something like group queer contemporary art exhibitions. So the art that I have studied was already presented as queer or gay, lesbian. There's, of course, much more of queer artistic production that could be talked about, but I'm going to talk about art presented at these 6 exhibitions. Maybe I should name these exhibitions. It was the Transgender Me first, second, and third edition that took place in 2011, 2012, 2013. And then the exhibition called Coming Soon, also taken place in 2011. And 2 more recent exhibitions, We Will Not Change Our Show and Queer Stories. Queer Stories is the only one that took place in Slovakia and not Czech Republic. And so you can see that all these rather big group exhibitions have taken place in the past decade. There has been some smaller exhibitions, usually featuring 2 or 3 artists. But I'm not gonna dwell into those that much. Another term that has to be analyzed in this title is the word queer. Of course, it can be sometimes a bit difficult to distinguish queer and LGBT, or queer and homosexual, gay, lesbian. It doesn't have to be. Some people have a very strict definition of each, and the term queer can be antagonizing of the terms like of more strict categories like lesbian or gay. But as we will see, there's some overlapping as well. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So let's say previous generations of art historians have been working with the terms homosexuality or homoerotic very much. I mean, previous generations may be a bit of a reach because these people still publish and live. But we can look at the only Czech publication that works with sexual differences within culture, which is the book Homosexuality in the History of Czech Culture, edited by Martin Cajputna. Next, please. And now I'm gonna mention some conceptions. I just cannot read this at all. Some definitions to show these differences in the meaning of each of the term. So, for example, Christopher Reed, who is the author of the book Art and Homosexuality, A History of Ideas, says that the rise of the term queer reflected the loss of faith in the coherence of gay and lesbian identity and was intended to unite a wide range of constituencies opposed to conventional notions of sexuality and gender. If queers, in theory, could move freely among forms of gender or sexuality, what they shared was an antagonism to normativity, which included efforts by some gays and lesbians to have these identities accepted as forms of normality premised on biological fixity. As we can see, Christopher Reed really sees the term queer, as many queer theorists do. All of them, actually. That's what queer theory is based on. He sees it as something opposed to the strict categories of gay and lesbian. However, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. James Smalls, who is the author of the book called Homosexuality in Art, I believe that's him, who sees the concept of homosexuality quite diversely as some might see the usage of the term queer. So he says, unlike art, the other term in this book's title, homosexuality, can be defined more specifically. Homosexuality and its emotional aspects have existed in all cultures and in all time periods, long before the invention of the term. Homosexuality is a diverse concept that refers to a range of feelings and emotions. Its meaning will vary for different people at different times and in different cultures. What is clear is that homosexuality cannot and should not be minimalized or limited to sexual behavior alone. So within art history, he sticks to the term homosexuality, even to newer or more contemporaneous periods, and uses them instead of queer. Okay, next. Okay, and last but not least, we have David Chegeti, who is the editor of publication called Queer, which is part of the Documents of Contemporary Art published by the Whitechapel Gallery. And he defines queer art or queerness as outlaw sensibilities, self-made kinships, chosen lineages, utopic futurity, exilic commitment, and rage at institutions that police the borders of the normal. Since its formulation in the crucible of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, queer has an ongoing political and cultural currency that continues to prove catalytic to artists and thinkers. So David Chegeti really ties the concept of queer art to queer politics that were born in the 1980s. And he sees visual culture in general, but queer art more specifically, as something crucial to the politics of queerness in its birth. So this might be one of the more common, let's say, and more progressive notions of queer art. But as Eastern Europeans, or people who are not from Western Europe, specifically the UK or USA, we might have an issue with this definition or this notion, because it suggests that the birth of queer politics and queerness and queer art is in the AIDS crisis and in the Stonewall riots, which only after that seems that which some people here in Eastern Europe believe as well, that queerness and LGBT activism and everything has been brought to us from the West, that it's an import from the West, which is not true. I'm gonna deal with that in a second. I'm just gonna say that I have identified 5 major topics, recurring topics that appear in the past, the 6 exhibitions that I have mentioned. And these themes are history, continuity, and archives, being the first one. Then the second one is transness, and transgender bodies. Third one is identities, categories, and visibility. Fourth one is gender norms and sexual norms. And the last one is marriage equality and rainbow families. And now I'm gonna go through these 5 topics, showing you the artworks that deal with these topics. Okay, next. Thank you. So, history, continuity, and archives. Next. Okay, this topic appeared in several ways, mainly in the exhibition that took place almost 2 years ago in Brno, in Dům umění, in the Brno Art House, which was called We Will Not Change Our Show, curated by Martin Vaněk and Jula Muškovič. Next. And this is the opening of the exhibition, not the opening, but this is the first room of the exhibition. And the exhibition was opened by the installation of Queer Archives Institute, run by Karol Radziszewski. Karol Radziszewski is a Polish artist who has presented his work in Czech Republic several times. That's why I that's why I wanted to include it in the queer art scene of Czech Republic and Slovak Republic, because Karol has been very prominent here. He has collaborated with local artists as well, and Karol has been working. Since 2005, he has been publishing the Dick Fagazine, which is a magazine focused on queerness or gay, mainly gay, male gay communities before 1989. And he has been mapping the communities in post-socialist countries. So the installation showed these very formal glass boxes of the Dick magazines. Next. So yeah, here we can see the Czechoslovakian edition of the Dick magazine. Each of the boxes basically showcased a different topic. And yeah, even though he mainly focuses on male histories and male gayness or homosexuality, he in the Czechoslovakian issue he has given quite a lot of space to the lesbian experience before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Okay, next. Yes. So on the left side, we can see the part of the about Philo magazine, which is kind of the predecessor or inspiration for his Dick magazine. Philo was published by Richard Kisiel, who Carol has collaborated with a lot, and he even made this art project about him. It was a movie called Kisieland, which I'm going to talk about in a bit as well. And on the right side, we can see all the mentions about AIDS, showing that, you know, even though the AIDS crisis was not perhaps that crucial for the beginning of queer politics here, it also was a topic that was talked about. Okay, next. Okay, these are... Okay, I'm back. Sorry. All right. Yeah, I think we can go to the next one. This is actually from a different exhibition. It was a collaboration between Józef Rabara and Karol Radziszewski, where Karol presented the project Kisieland, and Józef Rabara presented his project called Tomorrow Will Be Different. And they both, next. They presented, they both worked with the history. So while Kisieland was based on the history from around like 1980s, next. Jožo Rabara's project was from the first, or it was an archival work dealing with a diary of a person, of a gay man from the first half of the 20th century. So these two were juxtaposed within one project, and it also kind of showed how the history and both history and differences between now and the time before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Okay, next. Okay, so this is another project or art piece from the show We Will Not Change Our Show. This was called Songs and Ballads from Romanian Gay History by Paula Dunker, and Alex Bala, who showed in this classroom setup that different stories about queer people from the history going centuries back to also state socialism in Romania, but also after that when some of the socialist decisions were continued after the fall. Yeah, we can go to next. And this is the third instance that history and person or archives work with in this exhibition. This is called this installation is called Express Yourself, and it was made by Martin Vaniek, who was the curator. And this is his personal collection of Madonna memorabilia, showing his admiration and also what Madonna kind of gave him when he was younger. So I thought this was a very innovative and different approach to archival work, and it's not a community history, but it's a personal history, and it's a very intimate thing. So yeah, I think it was it was great and kind of brave of him to show this, especially because he's not an artist but the curator. Okay, next. Okay, and now we're gonna deal with the topic of transness. Next. So, three of the exhibitions, as I said, Transgender Me 1, 2, and 3, were mainly dealing with the topic of transness, but there were other artworks that were dealing with other issues as well. But I'm gonna show these three series showing the different cultural approaches, or not approaches, but different cultural instances of transness. This is the community, or these are hijras from India who are trans women who have been in India for ages. This is a photo series by Lukáš Houdek, who was one of the curators of the Transgender Me exhibitions. Okay, next. Yes, this is another series also dealing with traditional community of trans people, trans women again. These are moushes from Mexico, photographed by Yancourt. Next. And another series, also this was taken by an American photographer, Michael Dvorak, and he photographed the Two-Spirit people, who's also old and traditional community of trans people in North America. And next. Yes, and these three series I would like to juxtapose to this one by Lukáš Houdek again, who photographed these trans women in chat rooms online that show very more intimate and controlled, let's say, by the women, intimate portraits, kind of. Yeah, I think we have to move on. So next, thank you. This is the series Mate and Dane by Josef Rabara. This is Jožo photographed these two trans men during their transition, which is always a very, very intimate moment. Next. Yes, they are Mate and Danny. They also performed at the exhibition opening of Transgender Me because they in that time they worked as a drag duo, drag addicts. They did drag as drag kings. Yeah, next. This is their family. So I think this, the fact that they participated in the opening as well makes them more than just passive subjects, but active participants of the exhibition. Next. Thank you. So now we have identities, categories, and visibility. Okay, next. So one of the exhibitions, this one was called Coming Soon, and it was dealing solely with lesbian art. The exhibition, the curator, Tamara Moises, was asking herself and the artists who exhibited there, what is lesbian art? If there is something like lesbian art, even they were looking for a definition, not definition, but for expression of something that they haven't really seen before, because lesbian art is not a stable category that art historians would, for example, use, not in the Czech Republic. So next. I'm gonna talk about this one piece by Damian Machaj, who back then still identifies as a lesbian artist, but doesn't anymore. This piece is called After Sarah Lucas. If we can go to the next one, you will see why, because he used this picture of Sarah Lucas and accompanied these pictures by a text where he kind of rejects the category of queer or lesbian art. He says that, in spite of that, in this work, I turn back to examine the grounds of the label queer art. I wonder why I don't feel comfortable seen as a queer artist, and why I see this label as a limitation. In my idealistic beliefs in art, I see a body of art as a complexity within the particular individual thing. I think I understand his refusal to be categorized or to be put in a box and be labeled as a lesbian or queer artist. But at the same time, there's this tendency, especially among lesbian artists, not to label their art. And I think even though this exhibition took place 10 years ago, these questions are still relevant, because we still don't have a working category of lesbian art here in Czech Republic. Okay, next. All right, so now we're dealing with gender norms and sexual norms. Next. So this piece was made by Alena Faustkova. It's called Punishment. And in this piece, she wrote the word or the phrase "I am normal" several thousand times on the wall in docs. I think this is the essence of queer theory, because she is working with norms and deviations, because obviously if she has to write it that many times, she is struggling with the notion or the fact that she is seen as normal. Yeah, next. So these pieces are made by Robert Gabris. It's a series of drawings, pencil drawings on recycled paper called Cyberlove, where he thematizes well, he deals with the reduction of male homosexuality into the act of the sex, and mainly erect penises and ejaculation. And as you can see, it also says things like "suck me 32, no fat, no Asians, straight acting only," which is referring excuse me, which is referring to the racism platforms like Grindr, where it kind of intersects sexuality with race and gender expression. Okay, we can go to the next one. Yes, another one. This one says, Slovakian fathers, you have nice sons, which is a play on a traditional Slovak song, which also, well, this reference is mainly the heteronormativity and gender stereotypes in Slovakian environment. I think we can go to the next one. And this is Ivan Jurica. His piece, Post-Colonial Violence or Beyond Racialized Desire, where he also deals with the intersection of post-colonialism and sexuality and these complex matrices where all these issues intertwine together. Okay, and now we move to the next one, which is the last topic of marriage equality and rainbow families, which is explicitly connected to LGBT activism, which I thought was important to talk about, even though there are only two pieces or two artists who deal with this. So next. The first one is Monika Kovachova, who published this, let's call it fake news. This was published in SME blog, but it was in the blog section, so it was not edited by anybody else. And it claims that Slovak gays and lesbians can get married. It's a media infiltration. It was a bit of a provocation because Slovakia doesn't have marriage equality. I think, yeah, she mainly aimed at reactions. Okay, and the last one, or this is the last series. This is Jana Stepanova and her family map. This was a very extensive project from 2004 to 2010. where she photographed these queer families. So, for example, this is Hannes, Christoph, and Martin. Two dads. One of them is trans. And yeah, basically all these pictures that we're gonna go through now are just depictions of different queer families from different countries. I think it's Germany, United States, and Czech Republic. So next, next, next. This is Matty and Danny again. Next, 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 and next. I think these were supposed to be somewhere. Okay, next and next. Okay, and this picture is my conclusion. I haven't even put the name of the artist, but this is a piece by Gordon Hall. It's called Set 4. I'm sorry. Well, this was not presented in Czech Republic or Slovakia, but it brings me back to David J. Getzi, because in the book Pink Labor on Golden Streets, he talks, there's an interview with him. It's David J. Getzi in conversation with William J. Simmons. And they talk about the possibilities of abstractions, transgender, and queer capacities. And they see abstract art as an alternative to the politics of representational visibility, which could bring some more freedom to trans artists or trans representation, or not representation, but the issue. And it's something that we, for example, don't see here, or we haven't seen in the 6 exhibitions that I have analyzed. But that doesn't mean that there's no artists who don't work with queer abstraction. It just hasn't been presented to the public as queer art yet. Yeah, and so in conclusion, I would also like to say that we cannot really see when we think back of David J. Getzi and his definition of queer art as something full of rage and something super against norms and against institutions and being outlaw and all these things. We see that the art that is presented here in Czech and Slovakia as queer art is different, and it very much deals with sexuality and gender, but not in super explicit ways. But I would say it's more full of enjoyment and not as much rage. This is the Polish art historian Paweł Leszkowicz, who deals with also the topics of queer art and exhibiting queer art. He describes Polish or Eastern European queer art as opposed to very in contrast to the more violent and rageful Western queer art. And I think I have to agree with him with his definition. So thank you for your attention. And oh, the next slide, last slide, maybe. Thank you. Yeah, this is just a thank you to Michelle Adlerová, Lukáš Houdek, and Tamara Moises, who have provided me with the material that I have showed you. Okay, thank you.